Our girls team, I'm not sure how many of you were board members 5 years ago. My first 2 years with the district as AD and principal, our girls basketball team struggled. They didn't win a game for 2 straight years. Last night, they took on the 3-time defending champion Southern District Warriors. They gave them everything they got, and they had that team spirit. And Emma, being one of our senior players, was a big part of that. So, you know, they just the same team that beat Ashland for soccer for the Division II title this fall. So I just want to kind of give some respect to their team.
Congratulations. Okay, we'll continue. The next is committee reports. And then we have a policy committee meeting date, right?
Yeah, we're going to need to just look at a few student policies. One specific, one in particular, I think that is needed, not because of anything that's happened, but just to be proactive, would be a staff social media policy with as big as social media is getting and as careful as we need to be to separate, you know, our rights, our First Amendment rights, but also our commitment to the profession. I think it'd be really wise. So I'd just like to set a meeting date. The policy committee here is who in this district?
Was it Lena or Melissa on it? I'm not sure.
I'll have to go check the standings.
I believe it's Melissa and John.
Okay. Would you guys prefer if I send some dates to you to consider? Would that be the easiest way to do it? Rather than try to iron that out here? Okay, I'll do that and we'll try to get something done. Thank you.
Okay. Next on the agenda, under old business, we have the Valley Unified Education Center interlocal agreement.
Yeah.
Then we'll address that.
So you have the interlocal agreement document in front of you. This was taken to the Valley Unified Board 2 weeks ago, and essentially what the exercise was to go over items 1 through 10 in the interlocal agreement and talk about if there's any issues. And then the next meeting will go over items 11 through 20. So we can go through the entire document to try to iron out any possible concerns. You'll see in the little boxes, I've annotated some notes that I took during that meeting. And these were some suggested possible revisions for the future. One of them was actually suggested by our assistant superintendent, that it would be a good idea to change the language of regional service center throughout the document to education service center, because that's what we are now. It is no longer a regional service center. So that was one suggestion. You can go down to item number 5. It was suggested by one Valley Unified board member that, where it was a question, essentially, is a 25-year agreement, is it necessary? Because a 25-year agreement was specific to the debt service. If we would have built the regional high school, you essentially would have had 25 years of any debt service for things above and beyond what was covered by the grant. So the question was, do we need that now that the school is not being built? On the next page, Valley Unified board member suggested that the entire section 8 be revisited. That's the governing body board of directors. So items A through H, to look at those. And then I made a suggestion to item 9A. Perhaps that language for regional integrated consolidated secondary school incubator doesn't need to be there anymore now that we're not going to be building that school. So in my mind, it was just additional language. It was mentioned last night by a Valley Unified board member from MSAD33 that we also need to consider that the reason we were not allowed to govern the school as Valley Unified was because Valley Unified is not an RSU. So having language specific to constructing a school may be a moot point anyway, because we weren't able to build a school as this entity. On the next page, item B, those are the shared services that could be offered. It was suggested by a board member that perhaps we should put an appendix of what we actually do offer. And I have a document that I'll share with you in a minute of those shared services. And then I also mentioned items C and D as possible removals, because those also are specific to the regional integrated consolidated school or the transportation of that school. So I did tell the Valley Unified board members I would take it to each of the boards for discussion and consideration. I don't believe we need to make any decisions right now. Ultimately, this ILA is in the governance of the Valley Unified board, and they essentially have to make the votes to change it. But I'm sure Josh and Rose and Gerard would like to know how you guys all feel about the suggestions made so far on that document.
Well, first of all, I'm in favor of the suggestions that you made, regarding the school. Okay. And that was, okay, anything that refers to the school, as you suggested, maybe should be removed because it's no longer applicable to our agreement, I guess.
Right.
Yeah. So, but as far as other things, I don't know about the 25-year agreement. I mean, I have no problems with it, but and then I don't know why the board member suggested adding an appendix. I think we have a list of services we provide.
Right, so on the screen, and I apologize, I wanted to print this out for you. On the screen are our shared services, and this is essentially what I believe the board member was referring to, as I did present this to the Valley Unified Board as well. We currently offer superintendent services, assistant superintendent services, finance director services, innovative programs and community outreach services, which is what Peter Karen does. And by the way, on this document, I will get you it so that you can see, if you're wondering, what are the major things that Ben does throughout his day? What are the major things that Giselle does? This will be a document where you can go to and basically see how we've divided our workload in order to be more efficient for you. Curriculum coordinator services, Sharon Chassis, food service director, Melanie. We have shared central office services that we would like to speak to you about in a little bit. Health integrator services, so the 8th grade health program, the 8th grade career services program, half-time French integrator for our elementary students. We have a unified power school student information service that's reimbursed by the state because we're unified in that. We have a unified Empower learning management system. We have a unified Tyler Technologies financial system that's also reimbursed by the state. We have a unified time clock that's also reimbursed by the state. Our curriculum is unified, our transit bus we use together, professional development is unified, and of course we do quite a bit of grant writing. So we do have quite a bit of services that we offer. It can be added to an ILA as an attachment if it ever changes. That could be updated. That's quite easy. It's already developed. But I did want to also present this to you because I think it's important as we move forward. We would like some sense from this board whether or not you're comfortable moving forward with the above shared services, because we need to go back to the Valley Unified Board and approve a budget, and we can't approve a budget unless we know what shared services we're going to offer. So
Josh, do you have a comment?
Yep. So if I may, after attending the Valley Unified meeting, I gave it some thought about everything that was discussed. As Rose said, I'm all set with the assistant superintendent making this change other than cost. Then with your comments, with your changes, I find that's okay. We can remove that. The one that strikes me the most is the first one with the term, the 25-year term. I think if we're gonna have a healthy relationship and a partnership, we need a little bit of commitment. And I think that's gonna come with a term like this. That way we're not having people in and out all the time. And we sign the commitment, we're going through it. And this was even before I was on the board that this was signed. I don't see any reason to change that at the moment. I think it's just 25-year commitment is nice to have, so we have a working party, a partnership. And to me, I think that they should stay that way, but that's just my opinion. And as far as reworking, I like this, the appendix, that's pretty neat. I think I would not mind having that on there so it's easier to find what we share. Addressing the governing body, that's been in talks now for almost 2 years, or a year at least to address, and I think it's being worked on. We just have to get all parties together and just work it out. I don't know if it's right to start changing anything yet until the dust settles and we know where we're going. I think if we start changing things now, it might be premature and we might regret things down the line, or that's just my feelings. That's how I feel.
And that's one thing I did mention last night to the SAB 27 board, that perhaps just going through the exercise of identifying what we may have issues with, and then once that is all done, then we can take the next step from there. But I think, this was just a first step in that, in identifying what may be some concerns. And some of them are new and for us, and some of them I think we knew have existed for a little while.
Gerard, did you have anything to add?
No, I agree with whatever Ben had, the note that he had there. And really, I really agree with this.
Yeah.
And I don't think this should be changed at all to begin with. But not knowing what the other SAUs are gonna, so, I feel like we're in limbo, that we don't know how to proceed.
Yeah.
Because the others haven't decided either how they're gonna proceed, so.
I can tell you that Madawaska did move to approve all of these shared services. And last night, the 27 board did not oppose, but I believe they just, the comment was that they weren't going to take position on it. So it was not a refusal, but it was not approval. So if you are in favor of it, I would ask that you certify that with a motion so that we can have it for the record. That way, at least when I go to the Valley Unified Board, I can say this board, is supporting, this board is supporting, this board is not opposing it, and then we can move forward from there.
Is there any more questions? Okay, so I'll entertain a motion then to approve the shared services for this year.
I move that we approve the shared services.
Gerard, is there a second? Josh? Any questions? Comments? No? Okay, if not, we'll vote in favor of sharing the services. Okay. Any opposed? No, all in favor.
One thing I did want to just mention as I'm going through the shared services is when we talk about shared central office services, the vision for that, beyond your superintendent, your assistant superintendent, your director of finance, was to work with our central office employees to create efficiencies that way. And we've learned through the past 2 years now that it's very, very difficult to do those efficiencies when we have 3 separate central offices. And we always knew that the goal was to get to that regional school or wherever that regional central office was going to be. Now that that's not going to happen, we've kind of shifted our mindset to looking at this center for a possible central office. And it's difficult with expanding programs, as Kevin showed you. You know, that space where he has that machinery was a usable space for the welding program, you know, just this last year. So this building is not, it doesn't have a whole lot of space, especially for a central office. We'd be looking at maybe, you know, taking the second story here and building off and creating something up there, which would cost funds. Or we'd be looking at stealing the current office here where Kevin and his staff are, which obviously is not a solution for Kevin, or taking this room and that room and the old kitchen, and it just, or building an addition to the building, and it just really doesn't make sense right now. As Josh says, we need to let the dust settle on things, I think, before we start talking plans about building and moving forward. So I think it's going to be our recommendation before I lose Lucy to stress that we look at partially replacing what we lost when Karen retired. We've been doing it through a shared service with Madawaska, which is when we had Carol in Madawaska, who was a veteran who knew payroll in and out. Carol has since left, and we have a new person in Madawaska, and it's a lot to ask for a new person to be able to swing both districts. So when we do present your budget to you, we're going to be looking at possibly adding a position to the central office, possibly not 40 hours, but you know, 30 to 35 hours, in order to you know, make that gap, because we just can't get together and create those efficiencies that way. Lucy, did you want to add anything?
No, you covered it. It's, I never give up until I try it. I've tried it. It's tough. I'm not doing anybody any favors, so it's time to do something different.
And we think, I mean, Karen knew this district in and out, just as Carol knew Madawaska in and out. And when you lose those key people, it's very, very difficult to replace that. And things are working out with our new employee in Madawaska, and it will here when we employ someone here too, but it takes time to get there where we're in a flow. So we'll talk more about that when the time comes.
Okay, next is the MSAD33 planning, discussion, intervention services.
So we are in the works of planning some interventions for kiddos who have lost the most during these pandemic times, and trying to recapture some of that learning. And one idea that I pitched to Cheryl is called Camp Kindergarten. Essentially, you know, I'm picturing little T-shirts with, you know, little karate dudes on it. I don't know. We'll think of something really cool. But Camp Kindergarten essentially would be, you know, taking our current pre-K learners and identifying the most needy after this year for some recapturing and some skill building before they go into kindergarten. That way the gap isn't widened further by a summer layoff, and we all know that often happens. So you know, focus on foundational literacy, foundational math, social emotional skills, and our core values. Children would qualify based on primarily the current pre-K teacher recommendations. It's hard to get assessment data from pre-K, but just observing and looking and discussing with your colleagues about what is going on is pretty obvious. So identifying those kids that would need the most, and then depending on what kind of ratio we get or what kind of participation we get from staff, we'd essentially like to have a ratio of 1 to 5. So if we get one teacher who's willing to do this, we could bring in 5 kids. 2 educators, we could bring in 10. And 10 is half of your pre-K class, so that'd be pretty fantastic. We would offer it at all the elementary schools, but for you here at Dr. Levac Elementary School, it would be free. We would look to use some of our ESSER funds, or maybe if we have CARES funds left over, to provide the stipend for the teachers who are providing these services. We even offer some transportation if that was difficult for families. And we're essentially looking at the dates right before school starts. So for you all in Madawaska and Dr. Levac are on the same schedule. We're looking at Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, the week of the 16th, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, the week of the 23rd, then Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, the week of the 30th, and then school starts the following week. So it's 9 days, it's 3 hours a day, 8:30 to 11:30. So it's 27 hours of intervention where we really just like to get these kids caught up. So this is one idea that we're thinking about. When I did present it to Cheryl, she's like, well, what about first grade? What about second grade? We'll get there, but we'll take kindergarten for now and see, if we can get staff engaged in it. That's the first key. A lot of times it's hard to get staff to come in on summers after they've worked such a long year. So we'll work with that. But also looking at, can we offer summer school services at Wisdom, for example? Can we do that? If we can't, can we look to partner with a neighboring school and see if we can do it that way? We just like to offer as much as we can and try to really capitalize on getting kids caught up. So just an idea I wanted to share with you on that.
Okay, and we'll continue to remote learning.
So we're also looking at the future of remote learning. Although our staff will probably all be vaccinated by next fall, knock on wood, everything goes well, or at least we'll have the opportunity to have been vaccinated. It's highly unlikely children will have vaccines as early as next fall because those are still in clinical trials. So we know that next year, starting the school year, this is probably still going to be a reality. We're hoping that because so many individuals have been vaccinated for adults, that maybe the restrictions are eased even further. But we do believe that masking for sure will be something, and required quarantining will still be a thing for cohorts of kids if they do come in close contact with an infectious person. So with all that, there may still be families who are worried about sending their children to school. As Cheryl presented a while ago, we still have 4. Maybe that 4 will be 0 next year. We won't even have to have that conversation. But we do know in the event that we have to quarantine folks, we do want to provide them with remote education. A little bit easier to solve at the elementary level with our dedicated remote teachers. Right now, our elementary kids do have the opportunity of being taught by 2 remote teachers out of Fort Kent, Ms. Kayan and Ms. Julie. And then for grades 6 and up, they're taught by their own teacher. They're on Zoom land while their classmates are in class, and so on and so forth. So we're looking at some options for the future of this. And these are just options that we threw out, and we realized, well, some of these are not going to work. Option 1 was an idea to, maybe we need a dedicated teacher for every content area, for sustainability of remote learning. We don't think that this is a viable option because there's no way we're going to find certified ELA, math, science, social studies, language arts, and arts certificated people to do this. Nor can we afford it. But we thought, well, we'll throw down, we'll do the pros and cons, and we'll see where we go with it. So option 1 is highly unlikely to be something that we're going to look at. Option 2 is a concept where, what if next year, and I'm speaking more at the middle high school level, what if next year we have a 6-period day? And Wisdom has a 6-period day, and I'm just throwing out 6 periods. It might be 7, it might be 4, I don't know. But Wisdom has a 6-period day, and Madawaska has a 6-period day, and 27 has a 6-period day. And what if we work with our union folks and we talk about, well, if we can free up teachers, block 1, we can free up Denise for block 1, where she can be a remote teacher just for block 1. So she's not going to have live kids in her class. She's just going to have Zoom kids for that block 1. And then block 2, it might be a math teacher in Madawaska. And block 3, it might be a science teacher in Fort Kent. It's just a thought right now, and we really haven't gone through with the union and talked with them, but we're just trying to throw ideas together of how we might be able to solve it. And if we can solve it within Wisdom itself, perfect. But if we can't solve it within Wisdom, can we solve it within Valley Unified? It's something that we're just looking at right now. Option 3 is something that's being done with some other schools. They're actually partnering with online learning companies. So essentially their remote learners are given access to an online program like Ingenuity or Edmentum or Apex Learning. Kids log on to that and they have a virtual program that they participate in. It's not ideal because it's not our teachers teaching those kids, but it is more sustainable because right now what our teachers are doing is very, very difficult. When you have kids on a screen, kids in your classroom, and you've got to manage both, very, very difficult. And I could let Denise talk about this for hours, and she could and would and share those stories. But this year's plan was good to get us away from what we did last year. We need to make next year's plan even better so that it's sustainable for teachers. So option 3 is another option that we're, just batting around. And then option 4 would be, well, what if the future of remote learning is an alternate pathway? So we kind of fold remote learning under the alternate pathway, and it would be part of TOPS Academy. So you could be an alternate learner in school, or you could be a remote learner, and then we'd have to figure out management of that. But this is also something we're just thinking about and looking at. We know what we did this year was amazing. It was our teachers should be commended on what they've done, but we want to make it even better next year with a plan that what's happening doesn't have to happen the same way. So just options. If you guys think of something even better, let me know, because
I don't know if I can discuss this right now, but what about what we had discussed last board meeting?
we have that. Yep. We do.
Any more questions for them? Okay, if not, we'll continue to ESSER 2 funding.
Idea right here. ESSER 2 funding idea. So I have this for you guys. So those, that spreadsheet that I shared with you is some thoughts that we put into ESSER 2 just initially. We haven't gone logged in and submitted an application or anything, but we've looked at some different options for your allocation. Your allocation for ESSER 2 is 196,859 is your total allocation. And the first thing that we did before we went to the principals with wish list of things, we knew that we have technology that is not equitable in throughout the 3 schools right now, because our last allocations were just couldn't get us there. So we still have a ways to get to equitable technology. One of those is a big piece is the clear touch screens. These clear touch screens we have in this building. For all instructors, we have them now at Dr. Levac Elementary School, -1 classroom, and then we would like to get there with the Wisdom classrooms. Those clear touch screens, we would be looking at 13 additional at a cost of $44,000. So they're not cheap, but they're amazing devices. And if you ever get the opportunity to go in a classroom where one is being used, this center, we have a couple of teachers who are absolute professionals with it now. I would highly recommend it. It's essentially like an iPad on the wall, and you can do amazing things with it. So that's one thing that we're looking at. Your administrators are advocating for as a possible purchase with these funds. We also are looking at getting the teachers MacBook Air devices with this allocation. One thought is we use this to get the MacBook Airs now, or the other thought might be to wait and do it with the MLTI. So it's that device right there that Henry's showing you. So we could do it with ESSER 2 funds, or we could do it with the regular budget when we talk about the student devices, because that's how you've done it in the past. But that would be at a total of $39,000, almost $40,000 to get our technology up to par with what our neighboring schools have done and what we'd like to do here in the district. Then you have cases for those laptops, protective sleeves, and a USB hub, one of these, so you can plug in your different devices because these MacBooks have limited ports. Another thing that we need to think about as well is, are we going to keep our additional nurse next year? With everything that goes on when you have to contact trace and required quarantines and contacting people and contacting providers, and now we have nurses contacting folks for vaccines. There's quite a bit that goes on, and as you know, prior to this year, you had one nurse for 3 buildings. So that's a conversation that we'll need to have. That would be about a 3% increase for next year, let's say. So we're looking at a little over $41,000 for that service from that individual. And then this year we had our temporary support personnel, essentially our super subs in our buildings, that were the go-to people when we needed coverage for that classroom, or go do that duty or whatever. And those have been really, really valuable as well. It comes at a cost of about $58,000 for the 3 of them, which is about $19,000 per person. And then last time, we did have discussions about the possibility of a hazard pay or some kind of specialty pay. And in my notes, I did finally, after asking, they must have been tired of me. I asked over and over and over the question about bonuses or hazard pay, and then the response I got was, in response to your inquiry regarding bonuses, the answer is yes, bonuses or hazard pay for local school district staff are related to COVID-19 would be an allowable use of ESSER funds, provided that it is a reasonable amount. The application of the SAU must make a compelling case that the use of the funds in this way is reasonable and necessary. As always, the review team, the department has the representation from people knowledgeable of school finance and federal and general funds, improves applications together so that they have various perspectives weighing in that is reasonable and necessary. Additionally, some SAUs have offered stipends to educators who have participated in additional professional development over and above the activities and time in their contracts. And that's something that Denise had presented as a possible consideration as well, especially for the teachers who are doing so much more in preparation for all of our various types of learning. So we just threw out a number for you just for consideration. If you were to do let's say a 1-week hazard pay for all of your employees at their per diem, at their rate of pay, it would be about $71,000 or $72,000 to do something like that for a week's worth of pay. I don't know if it'll be approved. I can make a compelling argument, and I would do that on your behalf in the application. But that's just food for thought for you to understand what that cost is. So when you total all the things that we're initially talking about, and by the way, we haven't listed shared teachers for remote learners. Those are other things that could have been listed, but we don't know if we're going to need them, so I didn't list it. We're already above allocation, so 257. So we're about $61,000 above allocation, which then we have to go back and say, okay, so what goes off and what stays on? So I just wanted to present this to you so you had some food for thought on how you want to proceed with these projects.
So no decision has to be made.
I don't think a decision has to be made. I think you guys need to think about, there were a lot of things tossed out last meeting about, can you use some of your local reserves for some of these things versus using this? As I mentioned, your MacBooks, that can be put in your budget as we're building the budget for the student devices. You've always put your teacher devices with the student devices in your budget, so that wouldn't be anything new. So we can do that. There's all kinds of flexibility, but even if you remove the MacBooks, you're still going to be shy about $20,000, $21,000 or so. And I haven't got to Cheryl's wish list yet.
It's long.
So, are there any questions for those?
Excuse me. I don't have any questions, but I forgot to make a comment when I was discussing Milty that I need, you're okay on, that might help with this. And that has to do with our student devices. So as you know, that the Milty devices right now are 5 years old and we won't be using them again next year. So I contacted a company called Second Life Mac, and they provided me a quote for, they're willing to purchase, no questions asked. This is what I like about this contract is that normally when you sell devices back to a remarketer, there's what's called rating, A, B, C, D, and A is you get the most money, B or D, you get the least amount of money. They're not gonna grade the devices. As long as the devices are working, they'll give us $235 per device. This is the student devices. And that's 225 student devices. So you're looking at about $52,000 that can help offset either the lease or purchasing these items here. Now, what the other two districts have done is that we offered the teacher devices that the teachers currently have to them at a price of $150. Madawaska's teachers, their department, they agreed to sell the devices to the teachers for $150. So that's another some money revenue coming in to help offset some of these items and more the leases for next year. All I need to know is if you will allow me to sign this contract. Now, what's nice about this is that we don't have to give these devices to them until June. So if we decide to sign this contract and say, okay, we'll sell back the student devices to them for $235, get about $52,000, use it either towards here or towards lease of the student devices, that will help offset some of your stuff. I just need to know whether you're going to allow me to sign this contract to do that. And the sooner I sign the contract, the sooner the price stays at $235. The longer I wait, the price goes down.
Those devices are not worth it. Sell them.
That sounds like it's.
So if this board decides that the teachers are allowed to buy the devices, we would offer their only Milty device. So I would go through and make sure the devices that they have are the 2016 Milty devices, and we would sell it to them for $150. And we did it 27, we did it in Madawaska, and the teachers were elated that we did that. And another reason why we did it too is that when the new devices comes in, it's a little bit of a learning curve with the new devices because of the new operating system. So what we did was we allowed the teachers to keep their current devices and their new devices for about 2 weeks, and then had them transition. And then after 2 weeks, we'd sell them their old devices. They would get their new devices. So there was that little transition that helped them. Plus, there's a lot of the new operating system and some familiarity that they had to get acquired to. So I apologize for forgetting that when we were talking about it. So I guess I just need to make approval. Yes, I can sign this contract to sell back the student devices. And yes, I can sell the teacher devices to the teachers.
So would we need to act on that time?
I think you probably should, so that you can take advantage of that price now.
Okay, so we'll need a motion to. Are there any more questions?
Thank you. I'm all set.
No questions? Okay, we'll go to a vote in favor. All, none opposed? Okay.
That's a great deal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess we're on to new business items for information. Any retirements?
No retirements, but we do have a resignation, we have a resignation of the ed tech at Wisdom, Bailey Robichaud, and I would need a motion to accept her resignation.
Do I have a motion to accept Bailey's resignation?
So moved.
Mr. Honor? Alex? Okay, any questions? Okay, if not, we'll take a vote in favor of accepting Bailey Robichaud's resignation. Okay, all in favor.
It's nothing we said, it's a better, a more lucrative job opportunity.
Okay, transfers,
No transfers,
the hires,
no new hires.
current openings, we still have.
We have an ed tech opening here, and we're going to have an ed tech opening also at Wisdom.
Okay. Okay, next is the appointment of coaches, and you'll have that list in your packet. So we'll need to have a motion to accept these coaches. Gerard? Is there a second? Second by Josh. Okay, any questions?
You realize you're approving Kevin LeBlanc for your softball.
Oh, boy.
Now you're saying that, I make you aware.
Yeah, but when you're scraping the bottom of the barrel.
Well, just to give Mr. LeBlanc some credit, I had talked with Mr. Pelletier, the athletic administrator. Kevin had originally had thought that he just, all that's going on, he just needed some time off. But I think his contract got to him over Christmas, and he changed his mind. So,
Yeah, Kevin doesn't know doubt.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to appoint the coaches. Okay, this list of coaches. In favor? All in favor? Okay, next is proposed meeting dates.
So you have a list of the proposed meeting dates for next year. It's essentially a copy of this year. I just adjusted the calendar dates. It's one day off, all Mondays. And it's essentially a 5-week rotation so that we can fit in the 4 boards in that rotation. Yeah, and it looks identical. And then we can always schedule special or emergency board meetings as needed.
Okay, so we'll need a motion to approve the 2021-22 meeting dates. Gerard? Second? Jean? Okay, any questions? If not, we'll vote. In favor? Okay, any opposed? All in favor? Okay, now we would need a motion to go into executive session for the annual evaluation of the superintendent pursuant to 1 MRSA subsection 456A. Okay, so we'll need a motion to go into executive session.
I'll make a motion to go into executive session.
Okay. Is there a second to that? Gerard? Okay, and it is now 7:13. 7:13.